These 4 daughters, despite everything, despite the distance, despite the years of half-attention and cold silences, they never stopped loving their father. They showed up, they tried, they kept going, because that is what daughters do. Then one Tuesday morning, everything stopped. Richard was at his desk when it happened. His chest tightened like something had reached inside and closed a fist around his heart. The room tilted sideways. His vision blurred at the edges. He tried to stand and could not, and then he was on the floor, and people were shouting his name, and the sound of the office faded to nothing. Heart attack. The doctors said he was fortunate to be alive. Years of stress, of pushing too hard, of carrying weight, internal and external, had taken their toll. He would need rest, careful monitoring, time. Richard Carter, who had not stopped moving in 30 years, was flat on his back in a hospital bed, staring at a ceiling. He expected silence. He expected to lie there, the way pride usually leaves you. Alone, the door opened. Sophia walked in, still in her courtroom blazer, case files still under her arm. She had left court the moment she heard. She sat beside him, took his hand, said nothing, did not leave until morning. Victoria's phone rang mid-training session in another city. She did not finish the session. She did not pack carefully. She left. She walked into the hospital room that night and stood at the foot of his bed with red eyes and said, "You are not going anywhere, Dad. Not today. Not while I'm standing here." Charlotte had made 30 phone calls before she reached the hospital car park. Specialist, cardiac consultants, insurance coordination, second opinions. She arranged the best medical team available, with her own money, without telling anyone, and walked through the hospital door like she owned it. And Lily, who was already a nurse, became his shadow. She spoke to the medical staff in clinical language they respected. She monitored his charts. She checked his medication schedule. She sat through the nights when everyone else slept, watching the numbers on his monitors with calm, professional eyes. Richard lay in that bed, and he watched these 4 women, his daughters, move through that hospital room with a love so fierce and so purposeful that it was almost frightening. They were not there out of obligation. They were there because they loved him, even after everything. And something inside Richard's chest, something that had nothing to do with his heart condition, began very slowly to break open. On the 4th night, Richard could not sleep. He lay in the dark listening to the distant sounds of the hospital, beeping monitors, soft footsteps, and he thought about the blue nursery. He thought about the name James Richard Carter that had never belonged to anyone. He thought about 4 little girls rushing to the front door every evening, arms out, voices bright, and how he had walked past them. He thought about Sophia holding up a drawing and him saying, "That's nice," and putting it down without looking. He thought about Victoria saying on national television, "I have spent my whole life trying to make him proud." He thought about Charlotte running his company better than he had, and him calling the accountant to double-check because he couldn't quite believe it. He thought about Lily calling every Sunday, short answers or not, she called. He thought about Grace, sitting alone in the kitchen with a cold cup of tea, holding everything together while he built his walls higher. And he thought, what exactly were you waiting for, Richard? What son could have done more than this? What heir could have loved you more than these 4 women already do? The tears came without warning. They ran down the side of his face into the pillow, and he did not stop them. When Sophia came in early the next morning, he was awake. He looked at her for a long time, really looked, and he said, "Come here." She sat beside him. "Sophia." His voice came out rough, like something unpracticed. "I have not been the father you deserved. Not you, not any of your sisters." She opened her mouth. "Let me finish." She closed it. "I spent 20 years chasing something I thought I needed, and I could not see what God had already placed right in front of me. 4 daughters. 4, and I treated that like it wasn't enough." He stopped, steadied himself. "Forgive me, please. Sophia, composed, brilliant, always in control Sophia, put her head on his chest, and she wept like the little girl who had once drawn pictures of her father at school and told her teacher he was the greatest man in the world. Richard wrapped both arms around his daughter and held her, like he should have been holding her all along. Richard came home a different man, not perfect, not transformed overnight, but genuinely, visibly different. He sat at the dinner table and he was present. He put his phone down. He asked questions. He listened. He laughed, really laughed for the first time in years, and the sound of it startled everyone because they had forgotten what it sounded like. He called Victoria and asked her to send him her training videos. He watched every single one. He sat forward in his chair with his elbows on his knees, watching his daughter move, shaking his head slowly in disbelief and pride. He went to the office with Charlotte and spent a full week learning from her, not directing, not correcting, learning. He watched her command a room and speak to suppliers and close deals, and he felt something he had never allowed himself to feel about her before: awe. He called Sophia one evening just to talk. At the end of the call he said, "I heard about the case you won last month. I want you to know, your grandfather would have been speechless, and so am I." Sophia did not speak for several seconds. Then she said, "Thank you, Dad," 2 words. But the weight of 20 years was sitting inside them. He called Lily every single day, even when there was nothing in particular to say, just to hear her voice, just to stay connected to the daughter who had never stopped calling him, even when he barely answered. And Grace. He looked at Grace, really looked, and saw for the first time how much she had carried, how much she had held together, how much she had loved, without requiring anything in return. One evening they sat on the back porch as the sun went down. She rested her head on his shoulder. He kissed the top of her head, gently, slowly, and said, "I wasted so much time, Grace." She was quiet for a moment. The sky turned deep orange above them. Then she said, "Don't look back, Richard. Everything is still here. We are still here." The years that followed were the best of Richard's life. Sophia became one of the most respected lawyers in the country. She fought for people who had no voice, women, families, communities, and she won more than she lost. Her name appeared in legal journals, in national newspapers, on television panels, and wherever the name Carter was spoken in those circles, it was because of her. Victoria stood on an international podium with a gold medal around her neck. The national anthem played. The stadium was enormous. The lights were blinding. She looked into the camera, and she smiled, because she knew her father was watching from home, and she knew, this time, that he was proud, not just watching. Proud. Charlotte transformed Carter Logistics into something Richard had never imagined in his most ambitious moments. International contracts, new divisions, partnerships across borders. What Richard had spent 30 years building, Charlotte grew in 7. She did it with discipline, with intelligence, with the same relentless drive she had inherited from the father who had barely acknowledged her, and she did it with Richard beside her, not as her boss, but as her partner, learning from his daughter, proud of his daughter. Lily opened a free community medical clinic, funded by the family, run entirely by her, for people who had nothing and nowhere else to go. On the opening day, she stood at the entrance in her white coat, watching people walk through the doors, and she looked exactly like the little girl who used to chase butterflies in the backyard. Richard stood beside Grace at that opening. He watched Lily move through the clinic, calm, purposeful, completely in her element, and he felt something settle inside him, a wholeness, the kind that cannot be bought or built or negotiated, the kind that only comes when a man finally stops fighting what God gave him and simply receives it. On a Sunday evening, the whole family gathered in the backyard. No occasion, no reason, just all 6 of them, dinner, laughter, the kind of ordinary evening that is actually extraordinary when you know what it cost to get there. Richard stood up. Nobody expected it. He was not a man who made speeches. Everyone went quiet. He looked at Grace first, then he looked at each of his daughters, Sophia, Victoria, Charlotte, Lily, one by one. Really looked, and then he spoke. I spent the first half of my life believing that without a son, I was incomplete, that without a boy to carry my name, nothing I built would last. Nothing I was would matter. He paused. I was wrong. His voice dropped. Sophia, you walk into courtrooms and carry my name, and you win. Victoria, you stand on international podiums and carry my name, and you shine. Charlotte, you took everything I built and you made it something I could never have made alone. And Lily, his voice broke. Just once, he steadied it. Lily, you took care of me when I did not deserve it. When I had given you every reason to walk away, you called. You showed up, you stayed. He stopped. The backyard was absolutely silent. My daughters are my pride. They are my legacy. They are everything I was searching for. And they were here the whole time, right here. And I was too blind to see it. Grace pressed both hands over her mouth. All four daughters stood at exactly the same moment, and Richard opened his arms wide, and all four of them walked into them at once. Sophia, Victoria, Charlotte, Lily, all of them holding him, all of them crying, all of them finally receiving what they had been reaching for their entire lives. And Richard wept, not the tears of a broken man, the tears of a man who had finally come home.
And so, Richard Carter finally understood what so many men learn too late. A daughter is not a second place, she is not less. A daughter, she is a lawyer, a champion, a builder, a healer. And she will love you even when you don't deserve it. Richard called them his pride, and they were. They always had been. Now I want to ask you, if you were Richard, how long would it have taken you to see what was right in front of you? Drop your answer in the comment below, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this today, and subscribe because the next story is going to hit harder. I am Bams. Stay rooted, stay wise. This is African Tales by Bams. See you in the next one.